Okay, let's get into this. You know that daily habit, right? Grabbing that takeaway coffee, maybe an afternoon tea.
Oh, yeah, it's such a common routine for so many people.
It really is. But have you ever actually stopped and thought about whether that disposable cup might be, I don't know, adding something extra to your drink, something you didn't order?
It's a really valid question, actually. And it's particularly relevant because of some recent research. Scientists have been looking really closely at microplastic release from these exact cups.
Ah, microplastics. Yeah, we hear that term a lot these days. And this study honed right in on the takeaway cups then.
Exactly. They looked at, the common
Like
ones.
the standard paper ones with that shiny lining inside?
Those, yeah. The polyethylene or PE-coated paper cups, and also the all-plastic ones, polypropylene or PP cups.
Okay.
And even those foam ones, polystyrene or PS cups, though you maybe see those a bit less often now.
Right, right. So they covered the main bases.
They did. And our aim here really is to break down what this study found, what it might mean for you listening, but without, getting bogged down in overly technical stuff. That's the key takeaways.
Perfect. Because that's what Boost is all about, making this kind of research accessible. So the million-dollar question, what did they actually find? I have a feeling it might not be all sunshine and roses.
You're right to think that. The main finding, the big headline really, is pretty stark. They found microplastics were released from every single type of disposable cup they tested.
Every single one. Wow.
Yeah, it didn't matter if it was paper coated with plastic or just straight up plastic. They all shed these tiny, tiny plastic particles into the liquid.
Okay, so it's across the board. That's quite something in itself. Now, I seem to remember reading something about temperature playing a role because, let's face it, most of us are putting hot drinks in these things.
Exactly. And this is where it gets, well, quite interesting. The study showed very clearly that hot liquids they tested at around 95 degrees Celsius, typical for fresh coffee or tea, caused a significant increase in microplastic release.
Significant how?
We're talking like 2 to 5 times more microplastics coming off the cup compared to when the liquid was just at room temperature.
2 to 5 times.
So that hot drink isn't just warming you up, it seems to be leaching more plastic too.
That really makes you pause, doesn't it? Thinking about that piping hot morning coffee. So hotter drink equals more plastic bits. Simple as that.
That's the direct correlation the study points to, yeah. It really does make you think.
Okay, so can we put some numbers on this? You mentioned particles. How many are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, they quantified it. So per liter of liquid, they found averages. For the PE-coated paper cups, the Wacom and coffee shop ones, it was around 2,718 particles per liter.
Okay.
The PP plastic cups were very similar, actually, about 2,720 particles per liter.
Right.
And the PS foam cups were slightly lower, but still significant, averaging 2,629 particles per liter.
So thousands, no matter the type, really, thousands of particles in a liter. That's quite a lot to picture.
It is. It definitely puts it into perspective.
And what about reusing them? You know, some people try to be a bit greener, maybe rinse out a disposable cup and use it again. Does that help?
It's a nice thought, trying to get more life out of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the research suggests it doesn't really fix the microplastic problem. They did see a slight drop in the release on the second use.
Oh, okay. So a little bit less.
A little bit, yes, but significant amounts were still coming off. So reusing them once or twice doesn't really eliminate the exposure. Still shedding plastic.
Gotcha. So reuse isn't the magic bullet there. Now, you also mentioned something about the type of drink itself making a difference, like fizzy drinks.
Yes, that was another really important finding. When they tested different liquids, they found that acidic, carbonated beverages, think sodas, fizzy water, had a really dramatic effect, particularly on those PE-coated paper cups.
Dramatic how?
Those drinks caused the paper cups to release almost 5 times more microplastics compared to just using plain water in them.
5 times. Just from having a fizzy drink instead of water.
Yep. So that soda in a disposable paper cup might be delivering a much bigger dose of microplastics than you'd expect.
Wow. Okay. That's genuinely eye-opening. So let's talk about these particles themselves, microplastics. How small are we talking and, why the concern?
So the majority they found in this study were between 5 and 10 micrometers in size.
Which means, how small is that really?
Well, a micrometer is a millionth of a meter. So think about a human hair that's maybe 70 to 100 micrometers wide. These particles are much, much smaller, like 5 to 10 micrometers, almost invisible.
Tiny then.
Really tiny. And the concern with particles that small is the potential. the possibility that they might be able to get past biological barriers in our bodies, maybe even enter the bloodstream, though that needs more research, of course.
Okay, that potential is definitely a bit unsettling. Who actually did this work? Is it a credible source?
Yeah, good question. This research came out of China Jiliang University, specifically their Department of Environmental Engineering.
Okay.
And it wasn't a small study. They looked at 90 different batches of cups sourced from 51 manufacturers. So a pretty wide sample.
That sounds quite thorough.
It does. And as we said, they tested the three main types: PE-coated paper, PP plastic, PS plastic. They used some pretty sophisticated methods too, like scanning electron microscopy and Raman spectroscopy to actually identify and count the particles.
Right.
And they controlled the conditions using different liquids, different temperatures, trying to mimic how we actually use these cups.
Okay, so it feels like a solid piece of research, but like all science, I guess there are probably limitations or things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Always important to have that balanced view. The researchers themselves pointed out a few things. For instance, they mainly used ultra-pure water for testing.
Right, not coffee with milk and sugar.
Exactly. So real drinks might behave slightly differently. Maybe milk fats or other ingredients could change things. We don't know for sure from this study.
Makes sense.
Also, crucially, this study confirmed the presence and release of microplastics, but it didn't look into the long-term health effects of actually ingesting them. That's a whole other area of research.
Okay.
And while they tested cups from many manufacturers, they didn't do a brand-by-brand comparison. So, maybe some brands are slightly better or worse, but we can't tell from this specific work.
Right, so it gives us a really clear snapshot, even if it doesn't answer every single question. Okay, so let's bring it back to the listener. Knowing all this, what can you actually do? What are the practical steps?
Yeah, that's the most important part, isn't it? Turning the science into something actionable. And the good news is there are some pretty simple things you can do to cut down your potential exposure from these cups.
Okay, let's hear them.
Well, the single biggest impact, the most effective step, just use a reusable cup.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. Stainless steel, glass, ceramic, whatever you prefer. By using your own cup, you just take the disposable one out of the picture completely.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Avoid the source altogether. What else if maybe a reusable isn't always practical?
Okay, well, given the temperature effect, it seems sensible to try and avoid putting very hot drinks into those plastic-lined paper cups, or the fully plastic ones if you can help it.
Because they shed more when hot.
Exactly. Maybe let your drink cool down just a touch before pouring it in if you have to use a disposable. It might reduce the release somewhat.
A small tweak. Okay.
And based on the fizzy drink finding, maybe limit how often you're having carbonated or very acidic drinks in disposable cups, especially the paper ones.
Right. Stick to still water, perhaps, if you're using one.
Could be a better option, yes. And finally, honestly, just talking about it, spreading awareness, the more people know this stuff, the more demand there might be for better alternatives.
So, quite straightforward changes, really. Nothing too drastic. And it's about being informed, making those small adjustments, which, again, is exactly what we try to help with at BoostGB, breaking down research like this. If you like getting these kinds of insights, definitely check out the weekly newsletter at boostgb.com.
Exactly. It's those small, consistent choices that can add up over time.
So just to kind of wrap up the main findings, this research pretty clearly shows microplastics are coming out of all the common types of disposable cups.
Yes. Paper-lined, all plastic, foam, they all do it.
And hot drinks make it worse, potentially 2 to 5 times worse. Fizzy drinks, especially in paper cups, make it even worse still, maybe 5 times more than water.
That's the gist of it, yes.
But the positive takeaway is that we can actually do something about it quite easily.
We absolutely can, and that number one action is switching to reusable.
Right. Okay, so how about a little challenge for everyone listening? For this next week, just try it. Try consciously swapping that disposable cup for a reusable one whenever possible. Grab your travel mug.
Good challenge.
And hey, if you do, maybe snap a pic of your reusable cup in action and tag us at BoostGB. We'd genuinely love to see you taking the challenge on.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe one final thought to leave you with. Just take a second to think about how many disposable cups you might actually use in a typical week.
Yeah.
Now, maybe multiply that by the weeks in a month or even a year. Even if the amount from each cup is tiny, what does that cumulative exposure start to look like? It's certainly food for thought as we all learn more about microplastics in our environment and daily lives.
Definitely is something to ponder. And if you want more accessible breakdowns of important studies like this one, landing in your inbox weekly, do make sure you sign up for the newsletter over at boostgb.com.